Hi everybody, I'm Jared Pike. This is Shell Point Today for Wednesday, April 9th. On today's show, we look back at the automotive history of Phil Steen, who has owned everything from Stanley steamers to prototype electric cars from the 1970s. But first, we want to give you another reminder about your Easter dining options at Shell Point. On Sunday, April 20th, the Island Cafe will be open 7 a.m. to 2 p.m., so you can enjoy an early morning cup of coffee or custom-made hot breakfast or lunch. The Crystal Room will be open from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. with a bountiful buffet of baked ham, salmon, hand-carved lamb or prime rib, and made-to-order omelets. It's all you can eat of entrees, side items, and desserts for just $24.95. And at the Woodlands, the Palm Grill will be open from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. with special menu selections like filet mignon, Florida grouper, baked ham, salmon, or surf and turf. And if you prefer hosting the Easter meal in your home but don't feel like cooking, well, leave it all to us. Our Family Feast package will be fully cooked and ready to serve on Easter Sunday. Each family feast contains a baked ham or a full roasted turkey with all the fixins for just $56.95. You can even add homemade bakery items like dinner rolls and lemon meringue pie. To order a family feast, just call the Crystal Room at 454-2199. But don't wait. The deadline for ordering is this coming Monday. We're gearing up this month for our Route 66 variety show. And part of the show is a salute to car culture. And that's where you come in. We're looking for people with cool cars to park them in front of the village church that night and show them off to the Shell Point population. If you've got just the vehicle, call Leslie Brand at 454-2057 to line it up in our show. Of course, some people are more car aficionados than others. Consider Phil Steen of Coquina. He's owned everything from Model A's to a Stanley steamer, powered of course by steam, to a prototype electric car that outdates the Prius by at least 40 years. I talked with Phil about some of the more notable memories of his collection. When did your love affair with cars first start? What was your first recollection of cars, automobiles?
A neighbor up the street who was a car salesman, he had a new Chevrolet, which was everybody's eyes were on, because in those days, most of us, my parents didn't even have a car, and many people didn't, or if they did, it was an old thing, and I used to look at these shiny cars. But I lived in not a high-class neighborhood where people drove limousines or anything. We just drove Fords or whatever.
Do you remember your first car when you were a teenager?
Yes. Well, my first car when I was a teenager I bought before I was old enough to drive. I had a job in a grocery store part-time, and I bought a 1929 Ford Coupe from one of the other employees in the store, and I paid $15 for it. I drove it home, and I used it for a year. My parents didn't have a car, so it was our family car.
Wow. You've brought with you some pictures of cars you've collected over the years, cars you've owned and restored. What are some of the highlights?
This is a 1937 Packard 12-cylinder town car limousine. You can see the front compartment is open where the chauffeur would sit. Then there's a glass between the two sections. And this is the car after it was finished. That first picture was the car before, and this is the car after it was finished.
All right, tell me about this Stanley steamer here.
Okay, this car is this is a 1911 Stanley steamer. They made two sizes, a 10 horsepower and a 20 horsepower. This is a 20 horsepower, and it has the boiler is under the hood, and the engine is in the back. The steam engine is in the back, connected right to the back axle. You don't need a transmission in a steam car. All the power that's available from the engine is available from any speed at all, from dead stop right on up. And
how would you fuel a car like this?
This car, the fuel for the main burner was kerosene. Supposedly as clear as you can get it to keep it from getting dirty in there. It had also a pilot burner. The main burner went on and off as the car needed steam. They had a little pilot burner which used pure gasoline, like an unleaded gasoline, And that was on all the time. And then when the call for steam, the main burner would come on, and that would light it, and it would go. The car used 1 gallon of water per mile. Steam. It had a 40-gallon tank, so after 35 miles or so, you better start looking for water.
So yeah, you didn't go out in the country to drive.
Well, the cars there was a hose underneath of the one running board, and there was a pump on the car. You could put the hose. The manual, which came with the car in 1911, said you just pull up the nearest horse watering trough and throw the hose in, and it's filled up. There's not too many of them around anymore, so. Wow. It was a fun car to have and to drive. It took 45 minutes to start it from dead cold before you could start to move it.
So you really had to be dedicated.
Which is one reason that they disappeared off the market. This is a 1959 Renault Dauphine. But in the 70s, when the big gas shortage was on in the 1970s, I worked at Bell Laboratories, and there was a group there that worked on batteries. The telephone company used a lot of batteries. And they were experimenting with electric trucks for the telephone company. And this department, I knew some of the fellows in there, and one of the fellows in there got a hold of some of these Renaults. There was a group of them that were never sold as new cars. They were all brand new in the sense that they'd never been on the road. And we were able to get them and found a garage that would take all the engines out, the gas engines. They weren't very good gas engines anyway, and convert them. We put electric motors in, and one of the engineers in the battery department designed a switching system for an accelerator deal, and fixed them up, and we ran them. There was 12 golf cart batteries in there, 6 in the front where the trunk had been, and 6 in the back where the engine had been. And they.
So how far could you go?
Well, about 45 miles was the limit you could go. You could take it home at night, plug it in the garage, and next morning it was ready to go. And it was a round town car to go to work, to go to the store. It wasn't a business car, and it had about a 40-mile-an-hour top speed. But if you got near the end of the battery life in a day, you better not get onto a good hill because it wouldn't go up the hill. I got stuck once. My wife had to come and tow me home.
Well, let's get into some more conventional.
Well, here's a car, too. This is unusual. This is a 1936 car called an Alvis. It's a British sports car. And you notice the side mount, the spare tires in the fender. Some of these other older ones were in the fender, too, like that. That's where they carried the spares. That car was a very low production car made in England, and they never sold any in this country new. A few were brought over here like this for collectors, but they were, they raced these cars. This car, I don't know a particular one, but this model was raced on the road racing tracks in Europe in the 1930s. So they were.
Was it right-hand drive?
Right-hand drive. You're going down the road, and everybody's looking, where's the driver, and on the other side. Then we start with a Rolls-Royce. That's a 1934, they called it a baby Rolls. They made 2 sizes of Rolls. They started in about 1930 to make this smaller model. Same quality car, and but smaller engine, a smaller car physically. I don't know whether people didn't want to look so ostentatious when they were driving their Rolls Royce or what.
So what are these that we're looking at?
Now this is a 1912 Overland. It's called an Overland. You notice that the radiator and headlights and the frame around the windshield are brass. They call them brass cars, or the brass age. All the cars were made in those days with that, and you had to keep polishing all the time because brass tarnishes very easily.
Yeah.
But that was a 4-cylinder car. You had to crank it. It didn't have a starter. And it would crank
I
at the
see
start.
the crank. There's the crank right in front.
And that was a lot of fun to drive. It was a right-hand drive, too. Those early American cars were right-hand drive cars, too. This tank is for the gas for the headlights. The headlights were gas-operated. Wow. They had a little burner in there, and you open up the front, turn the gas on, and light it with a match. And didn't make very much light, but you could see the car anyway.
Well, we've got one more here.
That was okay. This is a 1930 Model A. That's a convertible coupe. And I bought that in 1991. Now, I bought my first Model A in 1941. I paid $15 for it. It was 12 years old. I bought this one in 1991, 50 years later, and it was fully restored, just looked like it came out of the factory. I paid $15,000 for it. And I drove it for about 7 or 8 years, and that was the last antique car I had. But it's been a great hobby, and I've had a lot of fun with it. Never had more than maybe 2 at a time. I never had a lot of cars at one time. But
well, Phil, it's been fun going through your collection here. There's lots of adventures and lots of memories. And if you have memories with your automobiles or any kind of vehicle, let us know here at Shell Point TV. We want to hear your stories. So, till next time, this is Phil Steen and Jared Pike with Hot Wheels. Have a great day.
This is a picture of a Willis Knight belonged to my grandfather, or one like it. You will notice the big thing, the back doors opened the opposite way than they do now. And I know a child opened it and fell out. And nowadays they open the other way, and the breeze actually keeps them closed pretty well. And it has running boards, and I remember we used to put suitcases on the running board. And we really looked like, we were very proud of Grandpa with his Willis Knight.
This Model T was my father's car, and it must have been about 1920 maybe, because I must have been about 10 years old. And he had to crank it every morning, you know, to get it started to go to work. Then when it rained, you had the side curtains you had to pull down, and if you had a flat, you was in trouble. You had to get out, and you had to put a piece of stick on it. We went on a trip to Chattanooga from Cincinnati, and it only cost $5 in gasoline. The first car that I had when we were married was a DeSoto, and I don't remember the year it was, but it was secondhand when we got it, of course.
My first date was in a rumble seat, and we went to a football game, but it was fun, and it didn't rain. It was very shaky, yes, that it was.
When I got married, I escaped from East Germany to West Germany, and later on my boyfriend came to West Germany. We got married in 1953, and that's the only thing we could afford, to have a vehicle. It's Isetta. It was like a toy, and I think they're coming back. I saw something very similar on television, and the steering wheel was in front, like all the steering wheels, and when you wanted to get out of the car, you had to push the steering wheel and walk out of the car. And the car was very light, so everybody who didn't like it where it was standing or parked could lift it up and put it in another place.
This is a 48 Pontiac. This is the first car we bought after my husband got out of the service after World War II. And we used to take all our children, we had 3 children, we take them for all kinds of rides all through the country of Ohio. And I have good memories of this car. Very comfortable. We could seat about 7 people because our children were very young at the time. And then you didn't have to have a seat for them, for each one of them like they do today. This was many years ago. I have many fond memories of this car too.
Well, my memory car of the 1920s was a Durant. I'm sure I'm saying that correctly. It was bright red. It was a sedan. It had isinglass windows and running boards. We thought it was the most glamorous thing. My father did not own a car, but my uncle across the country road from us had this, and it was always by his house, and we thought it was just wonderful. One day, he came out and said he would take us for a ride. I was playing with my sister, and I thought, if I'm going to ride in that car, I should run in the house and wash off my face and hands. But my sister, Theda, went just as she was. Well, when I came out from washing my hands and so forth, the car was gone. So I don't know what kind of a lesson I learned from that, but maybe just go as you are.
I'll tell you, it was a 1932 Ford, and it had a bad broken cross member on the front. They had one spring in the front of them, and when that spring broke, or that spring broke through the cross member, that car would tip sideways. I had a long time. Finally, I put a new cross member in it. I was a pretty good mechanic. I could fix anything. My mother was coming up Route 19, about 55 mile an hour. Back in them days, I think it was 50 mile an hour, and that was all you drove. Them cars would only run 50 mile an hour. She went out of a 1933 Ford. The doors opened from the front. She grabbed that door handle. My brother was just a kid, and he'd done something, and she got mad, and she grabbed that door handle, and out she went. She had a big old pocketbook, and that pocketbook emptied herself right up the road. Yeah, I never forgot that, though. I heard my grandmother going out of that car that way. She was 80-some years old. Never went to a doctor or nothing. She ate standing up for about a month after that.
If you've got a cool car like his, well, we want to show it off at the Route 66 Variety Show on April 29th. Call Leslie Brand at 454-2057 to learn more. Now, it's time to cover all of Wednesday's happenings from Resort Services. Then stay tuned for your menu choices and Village Church connections.
Thank you for tuning in with the happening segment of Shell Point TV. My name is Leslie Brand, and I'm here with Bev Chanley, and we are here to go over the activities going on today. And just to let everyone know that the food drive begins today at the Village Church, so make sure you gather up those canned goods and deliver. There's baskets at the Island, the Eagles Preserve, and at the Woodland Commons, so make sure you have a full week to do that. At 7:45, we have men's Bible study in the Osprey Room. 8 o'clock is the men's match play doubles tennis at the tennis courts at the Woodlands. 8:45, we have Lily & Company Jewelers for their weekly jewelry service in the Resident Activity Center. Jurassic Travel will be here at 9 o'clock in the Egret Room. 9 o'clock, the watercolor group with Phil Hilton will meet in the art studio. 9:15, we have card making and scrapbooking group in the Tarpon Room. 10 o'clock, ladies' Bible study will be in the Osprey Room. Men's match play doubles tennis will be at 10 o'clock at the tennis courts at the Woodlands. 10:15, Model Yacht Sailing Club will be at the Commons Lake. We have a Health Connections at 11:30, specifics in strength training, and the Health Club. That class is currently full. Now here's Bev for the afternoon activities.
Thank you, Leslie. At 1 o'clock, we have chess. That's played in the Library Lounge at the Resident Activity Center. At 1:30, the model train room will be open from tours. That'll go till 3:30. At 1:45, we have a Health Connections class. This is Balance and Mobility Training Level 1, and they'll be in the Health Club. It's currently full. At 2:30, it's time for Jazz and Stuff at the Grand Cypress Room. At 3 o'clock, it's Bible study at the King's Crown Community Room. Then we'll move to 3 o'clock for a Health Connections Pilates stretch class. That'll be in the Health Club. We also have 3 o'clock Memory Care Group. They meet in the Behavioral Health Medical Center. Sign up is required. At 3:30, we have one of our new Health Connections class, Aqua Agility and Conditioning. That's at the LifeQuest Aquatics Center. That's full. And at 4:30, we have indoor bocce at the Health Club. 5:45, we have a church choir rehearsal at the Village Church. And we round out the evening at 7:15 with prayer and praise at the Village Church. Well, we're sure glad you joined us today, and we will be back here again with the happening segment tomorrow.
Menus for Wednesday. In the Crystal Room, the Crystal Platter is Mediterranean meatloaf with quinoa and stewed tomatoes. The dinner special is the pasta buffet for $12.95, and the soup of the day is Duchess. In the Island Cafe for lunch on Wednesday, enjoy a Monte Cristo sandwich with chips for $7.25. The dinner special is fried shrimp for $8.25. Dinner specials in the Palm Grill on Wednesday are triple tail for $16.95 or grilled scallops for $18.95. All menus are available 24 hours a day at www.shellpoint.net.
Hi, welcome to Village Church Connections. I'm Andy Hawkins, the senior pastor of the Village Church, and I'm here today with Matt Hawkins, who just happens to have my same last name, and that's because he's my son. And I'm delighted that you're here with us, but actually we're here to talk about some substantive things, particularly as it concerns religious freedom issues. And so you're the resident expert in our family on religious freedom issues, and hope we can share some of that with the Shell Point community.
I'll do my best.
That's great. Let's talk first of all about the international scene. What sort of observations have you been able to make in recent years about religious freedom internationally?
Internationally, right now we see increased restrictions on religious freedom around the globe. Some fascinating research done by the Pew Forum indicates that restrictions around the globe are increasing on religion, but they also correspond with high levels of instability and conflict. In countries where you have broad religious freedom rights, you have a strong civil society, you have strong economic opportunities, and you have stability. So there are some people in the diplomatic community who are starting to maybe can reconsider the role of religion as far as foreign policy and conflict resolution and that kind of thing. It's a slow process, but the data from Pew Forum really helps to paint that picture.
So this is more than a philosophical issue or even an issue that concerns theological concerns. Right. This is something about how the world functions peacefully, really. And I would think that just simply from a pragmatic perspective, right, diplomats, the State Department would have a strong interest in seeing countries establish good religious freedom.
That's right.
And then, of course, you obviously are concerned about domestic issues. And so what's the landscape with respect to religious freedom here in the United States?
So a lot of people may be familiar with the trend in the 80s and 90s where most of the discussion over religious freedom and religious tolerance was kind of centered on what they called the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment, which basically meant, for example, does a display of the Ten Commandments or does a nativity scene constitute a breach of the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment? Is this state-sponsored religion?
Yeah, by virtue of the fact that those displays are on public property.
That's right, exactly. But what we've seen in the past several years is a shift from that question about state establishment of a church to questions on the Expression Clause. What are a person's rights with regard to expressing their religious freedom? So it's not so much a question of whether what's happening on public land is questionable, but the question now is what are people doing in the private civil service that constitutes appropriate religious expression, or are there limits to that?
So when you say the private sphere, that would be things like businesses, right?
That's right.
Yeah. So to what degree can businesses express their faith? It's important to recognize that HHS, for instance, has exempted churches.
Correct.
So if you're obviously a religious entity, there is an exemption for those kinds of issues. But the question is, the private citizen who owns a company, can they engage in religious activity and act according to their consciences, or are they restricted in doing so because of their participation in the marketplace?
That's exactly the question on the table. And actually, when you mention that churches are exempted, we're talking about very narrowly defined churches. So it doesn't necessarily, the exemption doesn't necessarily cover nonprofit organizations.
That might even be associated with churches.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. And some of the reasoning is that as soon as you offer your goods or services to the public, that's no longer what they call an inculcation of religious values. That's participating in the public square. So you have to play by the prescribed rules, presumably by the federal government. So this is the question on the table.
Well, this is a fascinating conversation. It gets us off to a good start in thinking about some of these kinds of things that I know many of us, and especially residents in Shell Point, who are very astute educationally and intellectually, and they look at the world and are very concerned about what happens in it, are very interested in this kind of topic. And we're glad that you came and spent some time with us, sharing about the things that you do and the landscape of religious freedom all across the globe.
Absolutely.
So we're thank you for joining us on this special occasion in which we have been discussing religious freedom issues, and we hope to see you soon, either in the community somewhere or at the Village Church. Blessings to each and every one of you.
We're glad you joined us for today's show. Tune in tomorrow as we offer a few very important golf cart safety tips. We'll also learn about this Sunday's matinee movie, Laurence Olivier's award-winning turn as Hamlet. Until then, this is Shell Point Today for Wednesday, April 9th. I'm Jared Pike, and from all of us here at Shell Point TV, we hope you have a great day, and we'll see you again tomorrow.